welcome back to the podcast. We're back with John Claridge for part 2 up in the Cotswolds. John, so if we sort of carry on from where we left off last week, which was your capture with Basil, and then we're going to talk about where you went on from there.
Yeah, well, the obvious progression, as we spoke of last week, going through the lakes. There was only one place to go now, and that was the Mecca that was the car park lake. Going on from the other lakes, you would always, though none of the lakes were easy by any stretch of the imagination, the car park was totally different league, really. The amount of captures it had done, the amount of angling pressure that was on there was immense. The quality of angler was top draw, and it was right with the big boys back then.
What year was it that you went on there, John?
The weekend after I got Basil, which was so I had Basil on October the 4th, 1999.
Right.
So the following Friday I was back up, and this time not as big a walk. So again, I turned up Friday afternoon, so it was weekend back then. Turned up sort of 3 o'clock on a Friday. I think at the time there was probably about 3 swims left, something like that. I think I had 17 swims on the car park, 16, 17 swims on the car park.
What was the stock around then as well, for those that don't know?
You still... I was lucky in that I fished it, really. Them years that I fished it was at its peak. They were just coming to their peak. You had all 9 of the original mirrors. Ever Arthur, Chunky, Big Orange, Baby Orange, Dustbin, Uglo, Single Scale. What have I missed? I said them all.
I wasn't counting, mate.
Yeah, Ever Arthur, Single, Big Orange, Dustbin, Chunky, Baby Orange, Pearly Tail.
Right.
Yeah, shouldn't forget that one because then I caught it 3 times. So you had 6 or 7 commons and the little funny mirror known as the Pineapple that had come from I think it was Jamie Smith's tank many years ago, which was like mid-double back then, high double, 18, something like that. So the commons were 18 to high 20s. You did have the old big common back then as well. You had 2 or 3 sort of original. You had the 9 mirrors, 2 big common, small common back then. Maybe one of the others was more original, so to speak. And then I say about half a dozen stocky commons. So in total stock, you probably had.
Okay. John's just had a tench bite, so we'll pause it for the minute, and I'll turn it back on if it turns out to be anything else. You mentioned what was in there. You said it was a peak at that time. Did your angling sort of change much as you moved on to there? Because I imagine, like you say, it's a bit of a sharp learning curve.
Sharp learning curve, yeah. The main difference was the lack of bites.
Right, yeah.
So North Lake was a reasonably busy lake, but the car park was a different league, yeah. You had, full-timers on there. You had people with a lot of time, and everyone was top of their game. No one missed a trick, really. Like I said, that first weekend when I got down, I think I had a choice of 2 or 3 swims.
Yeah.
Actually went into Waiting Man's, which turned out to be my favourite swim overall, and certainly main reason that it was probably my most successful swim. As I say, unbeknown at the time. I didn't have anything that weekend, but I was fortunate to see another very successful angler at the time that was on there, Steve Bagulatis. He was opposite me in the islands, and on Saturday afternoon I see him bent into a fish. I actually shouted across, I could see he was in a bit of difficulty. I was dragging him about here, there and everywhere. Derek was next to him. Anyone who knows Derek Rance, he's deaf and dumb, so shouting across didn't really do do a lot to get his attention. Pinky was in the curly, I think, and he was snoring away. So, although I was still in my chest waders because I was casting out at the time, I legged it all the way round to the islands. I was a bit fitter in them days, so I wasn't too dying when I got there. And Steve was using braid at the time, and the fish was certainly powerful. At once I had to grab hold of him as it was like dragging him down the shelf. And very powerful fish that once it turned up, came into the edge. I managed to net it, and it was Queen of the Lake, Heather the Lever. It was the second time Steve had it. And this time she was a fair bit bigger, and the first time she'd done 50, I think it was 51.4. So first, after hadn't been on the lake 24 hours, and helping out Heather. So
Wow.
Yeah, a good sort of start to the lake to see, the big girl. Obviously nothing myself, I've had a tench or something, but very. Obviously I started late. It was mid-October. Don't think a lot. Arthur came out of the snags that year. I think I was on Trumpton's at the time, so again sort of opposite. End of the month, Arthur came out, and so that was the two big girls had been out in the sort of short start of my car park career. But obviously going through the winter, very, very little get caught. Best chance of the winter seemed to be the dustbin, when Lewis Reed had that one. I think it was in February that year. So that was the sort of most likely one to be caught in the winter.
Right.
She was like 38 back then, hadn't gone 40 pound up until that date. Yeah, and I say Lewis had her at 38 something. I don't think a lot else got caught that winter. I pretty much went most weekends through the winter. I was obviously trying to learn as much of the lake as I could, more for the oncoming year. I had close season April and May. I think of that spring, I think I might have done a little bit over on the Match Lake. So I was able to sort of go over the car park now and again, have the odd walk round, sort of trying, viewing a few fish in the spring when they're without any angling pressure, try and learn a bit more of their habits. Again, like the other Yately lakes, it's very visual fishing, good climbing trees, lots of big weed beds, very clear water. So generally you could find them, certainly in the close season. Within a lap or two you should get, you'd find a lot of the stock. Learn, which ones hung about with, which fish, what areas they sort of preferred, just to try and give yourself as much information to store, in the memory bank as possible. Although obviously once angling pressure came, they would revert to their usual caginess. So that summer it was a one-man show really. Spoke last week when we was talking about the Cops Lake, Little John. He at the time it transpired that he'd been baiting virtually every day of the close season, and he trained them fish to his spots and to his pellet tactics. And that summer I used to call him the Pied Piper, because wherever he went, the carp would follow him. And it was a one-man show really. John just systematically went through the stock one by one, and overall that year I think there was 20 captures of the mirrors, and I think he'd had 11 of them. Bear in mind you had probably 30 regulars, something like that.
Right.
Plus other people. I think that year it was might have been a 50-man syndicate. But because it reverted from I think it was that year it reverted from being a complex ticket to an individual lake ticket. the north and the car park went separate syndicates. I can't remember if they were both on the same or whether they were separate, but 50 man rings a bell. And I say John had 55% of the captures, and the rest of the syndicate had 45%.
Well, did you always get a swim when you were there?
Yeah. Never not got a swim. Obviously, you were going a lot of the time going into the unfavoured swims. Some of the full timers would pull off on a Friday, which would free the lake up a little bit. Doing Sunday to Friday or Sunday to Saturday. Little John was full timer that year, but he was one of the full timers that spent his time. Although he was there, 90% of the time he wouldn't have a rod in.
Right.
He'd be occupying an area, he'd be baiting it, and he'd wait and wait before he put a rod in. He could be there 6 nights, and he would have a bait in the water for like 6 hours. But in those 6 hours, chances are he'd catch one. So he would wait and wait, and he had the time to be able to do that. But still, one thing, having the time, and another thing, actually putting them on the bank.
Yeah.
So, learned quite a lot by watching him. Not that he gave much away, he was pretty sort of secret squirrel what he was doing, but obviously being on the lake, some of the things rubbed off, and all the fish were getting caught out the edge. He trained them that much doing the edge. I think there was like 1 or 2 bites out in the pond that year. Everything really got caught in the edge because that's where they were used to feeding. So he trained them that much that it was just a natural way for them to go around and find their dinner. So later in that year, I'd gone all year without a bite. Never, a couple of times you thought, you felt a little bit close, but it wasn't until October, latter part of October. It's actually 20 years in a few hours' time, as we record this. 20 years exactly, early hours of tomorrow morning, that I had the first bite. So sort of backtracking to the Friday, I turned up, had a sort of lap of the lake, and obviously it was reasonably busy, but probably the latter part of October, it was probably half full, something like that. It wasn't rammed, but most of the usual sort of swims and areas were taken. The far end of the lake wasn't. You got into a habit, obviously, of checking all the margin spots that you could check. A lot of the time there'd be someone in there, so you would keep away. You get some people these days would just sort of walk in, look at someone's snag, but if someone was there, it was their snag, their climbing tree, and you didn't go in there. It's some of that gets lost these days, but back then obviously it was a strict no-no unless they said, if you want to go up the tree and crack on, sort of thing. But 9 times out of 10 you was left to it, so you didn't have them opportunities to look. I'd walked around on that Friday afternoon, and you always look for the telltale signs of spots being that little bit cleaner in fed. And I've walked past a chair, crept down the little path, and there's a bough of a tree and it goes out over the spot that under the tree that put pellet on in the past. So I looked down. That looks fed on. Just glowing that little bit more. Obviously at that time of year, all the leaves are coming off. There wasn't any leaves on it. It looked clean. So I thought, I'm going to go in the chair. Drop my bucket, whatever in. Going back down the main bank past Curly, going down, got to the island. Little John was in the island where he caught the majority of his fish. Not long back. He'd had heather earlier that month, and he was just he only had single scale and big orange left to catch, and he was just sort of hanging out the rest of the year trying. Single was the one he wanted, really. Big orange he classed as uncatchable. It was just every time he said he'd see it, sort of go down, roll over. It was basically looking for lines. It would like rub itself along the bottom, spin round, super cagey fish. If little John called out catchable at that time, it probably was. Yeah, I remarked to John. He said, "Oh, where you going?" I said, "Well, you can have a go in the chair. Spot looks clean." And he went, "Yeah, good shout." He said, "Pineapple's been up there, up on the main bank this week. I've seen the pineapple there a couple of times." And pineapple was like smallest carp in the lake. But at that time, I'd have been over the moon to catch pineapple.
Yeah.
I'd gone over a year without catching a carp. That was the carp. I hadn't fished anywhere else really. On there, I think I might have had a couple in the spring out the match lake. Sorry, but as for your main sort of water, I'd been on the car park over a year, with just a few tench to show for it. And so, bearing in mind, you're looking at 20 captures for the whole year for everyone.
Yeah.
It's never. You're going to be getting regular fish, not unless you're a Little John anyway. So with that, I've gone up and got into the routine of sort of basically at that point I was using big inline leads, small shortish braided hook links. I was fishing over pellet. Obviously, the fish were close to the bottom, hoovering. And I had been using like trimmed down boilies, but at that point, eating the pellet, that's all they want. 4mm pellet. I need something that mimic it really. This was sort of pretty much before the days of sort of like artificial plastic pellets and that. I needed something thing, so what I'd come up with was just like a sliver of cork I'd put on a long hair, super good single pellet either side of it, so I had like 2 pellets on there, a sliver of cork, which just obviously if the pellet started to wash off, still I had something on there, a little shot under it just to balance it. And I used to just put the whole lot in a small little tiny PVA bag of pellets, literally sort of golf ball size, and just like lowering it onto the spot. You could wade in under the bough of the tree where the spot was. The spot was literally 10 foot from the bank,
Right.
in about 4.5, 5 foot of water, something like that. But if you got out to the top of your waders, you could literally like lower it down onto the spot, get it on the exact spot you wanted. And what I'd do, because obviously the PVA bag would sit above the lead, so I was using sort of 4 foot, 5 foot lead core, so you actually had the end of the lead core in your hand and you just lower it down, and you could almost like dunk the lead down. It gave you a little bit of time to bounce the lead to where you wanted it. Okay, and as soon as you start to see the lead the bag start to melt and start to go, it would start. Obviously, the bag would start to split. It would start to go down. And as it went down, you could just literally jump the lead a couple of inches just to give you the separation. So you could see where the bag was. Obviously, a soft braided hook link. So you wanted a little bit of slack in there, but not too much. So if you had basically about 6-7 inch hook link, you could bounce the lead about 4 inches away. So you had a little bit of slack. So done that. Literally bait little handfuls of pellet around, away from obviously where the lead core was down. You could put back lead a little bit further down, and I could walk the rod back to the swim, which was literally sort of 20 yards down the bank. Obviously all locked up. So pellet was there. There'd been a fish about. Spot looked good. Just pretty sort of mild conditions for the time of year. Nothing. I think I might have had a couple of little liners that night, but nothing. Next morning, most of us quite often back then used to come in from the match lake. We used to go to the cafe in the morning. In the car park, quite often bites used to come a little bit later, so sometimes we'd go to the cafe and go later, or we wouldn't. I can't remember if we did that day. Might possibly have been about later, but I think I'd wound in. But I didn't actually wind in at 10 o'clock. I went in to obviously look to see what happened before everything. You could visually see the spot, see what had been fed in. I've gone in, just bumped myself up the bough of the tree a little bit, so I'm looking down over the spot as opposed to, so I'm more or less over the spot rather than looking at an angle. And most of the bait is gone. There's a tiny patch of bait left where my hook bait was. Literally like tea-plate size pellet, the rest of it's gone. So they've been in, they've fed, or something has, but they've done me pretty much. They've clocked obviously the rig and left it. So halfway there, but obviously I need to fine tune it. So I've gone up the shops, gone up the calf, whatever, come back to reset the thing, and the wind was quite pushing in that night, or that day, should I say. So probably lunchtime or whatever, I've gone in to reset the trap. All the time I've not seen a carp there, but obviously they are there, they're coming down the margin, there's more snags further up the margin. So I thought, right, how am I going to do this differently? So the main clump of bait that I put in that had been fed on, well, they fed on that spot obviously confidently. I just need to move the rig slightly to there, and then bait accordingly, just to try, and if they come in again, I've move things about. And it's instances like this, like when you're fishing out in the pond, how critical spots can be, and that you can get a bite from one spot, 2 foot to the side, slightly different bottom, slightly different makeup or anything, line lay or anything. It can be that critical between getting a bite and not getting a bite. So I've gone in, waves are coming in, so they're trying to get out. So basically I've got my unhooking mat out with me as well. I put that out in front of me on the water, so it's floating on the water. So it stopped so I can sort of see under it. Sort of, so yeah, it's giving me a flat spot. I can see under. While I'm doing that, obviously I've gone in and the water started to colour a little bit. So I've literally had to stand there for like 10 minutes or so, just stand still until the water's cleared enough that I can see right the way to the bottom in perfect clarity, because before obviously I had a little bit of discolourment on the bottom from where I've been stood is like, not being allowing me to see, everything in utter scrutiny. So again, rigs, everything the same, got a little bag on. Just I'm about to lower it down to where the spot is where I've seen. Just seeing this in the bottom, I'll say where the water's cleared, there's like half a breeze block in the gravel, but there's a slight recess literally of about inch and a half off the bottom. So you've got the smooth bit, the corner of the block, and then the hard gravel where they fed. So there's 1 or 2 pellets still left tight to the block, but basically where the block sort of thing. So I thought, well, if they're not getting to them pellets, that's where I need to put the line round, so they're not going to pick the line up if that's what spooked them the first day. So I've lowered the rig right down, again plopped the lead onto the bottom, just jinked it across over near the block, let the pellet go down so the hook bait's down in position, probably 5-6 inches away from the block, so it's clear on the really hard clean bit of gravel. And then I've just bumped the lead back towards me, so it's tight up against the block, so the lead's tight up against the block, the lead core's coming around the corner, so it's totally disguised. I've got, say, the lead core down, big lump of putty on the end of the lead core, a couple of more bits, so pinned it all back down. I think I even had like a landing net handle with the spreader block just to push the lead core right tight against the bottom. Another little back lead at the end of the lead core to keep everything down. And then I've walked the rod back down to the rest, another back lead, and then back to the rod and the rest. And again with the bait, I haven't put as much bait where the heavy bit of bait was, where I put my rig. I've just literally put 2 handfuls of pellet just to the side. I'm not spreading the pellet. I'm literally like just dropping it so it goes down into a column.
Yeah.
So it's literally little like handfuls as though you were placing it on the bottom, so they move from patch to patch. Because I've wanted them to suck up my hook bait and then go to move to the next patch. I don't want a complete carpet of pellet there that they're not going to move, and then hopefully I'll need them to move and the lead to do the work. So reset the trap. Finally felt confident that I'm going to catch the pineapple. Pineapple Johnson, the pineapple. That'll do me tonight, sort of thing. So I've gone to bed quite confident. Odd little liner, early hours of the morning, and then I think it was about 4:15, something like that, 4:30. Pretty much same sort of time as I'd had Basil the year before. If them rods just wrapped round, you're fishing at a bit of an angle. It's on the side of the platform. There's a little platform that sticks out in the chair. You've got the rod on the side, rod tip under the water. I say it's just arched round and fishing it. So I've, leapt on the rod in seconds, and it's swooped round. Obviously, you're fishing down towards snags. You're all locked up. It's clear where I've hooked the fish, but it's only got to go another 10 foot or something, and it would find snags. So you're holding on grim life. It's lunging on the end, and then it started to come back. And then as it swung out into the lake, I've just sort of gained, and it's just come like right the way out in front of the platform in front of me. Come up on the surface, sort of, it's all over, sort of thing. Chuck the net in, and then it sort of pulled down and taken. I've had it just back round a few turns. It's gone out. It's just gone round in a circle a couple of times, come back round, and I've scooped it up. Thinking, see, pineapple sort of had a bit of power and a bit of weight to it, but nothing immense, sort of thing. So pulled the net in, looked in. That looks quite big. So I grabbed the torch on, and that is big. And it ain't no little scaly pineapple. It's a proper one. And so I sort of turned it over, looked a couple of times, and lo and behold, it was chunky. So I always used to call a handsome carp. It was like one of the better sort of elite, clean, lovely mirrors that was in there. Some of them had more sort of character, all in their own unique way. They were all very special, but a nice way to get off the mark.
Wow.
So £42.6. So taken over a year since Basil, but another 40-pounder.
Oh, what a first
and,
bite.
The confidence to carry on. Very, very special one, that one.
Wow. And did it still fish? Would you say it's sort of mid-October by then?
22nd of October. There wasn't.
Were there many more chances?
No, I think that was one of the last bites that year. Might have done one in November or something like that.
Right.
But I think pretty much that was the year done. Certainly was for myself.
Right.
I'd say John had pretty much pulled off by then. But there might have been another capture or something, but I don't recall anything much.
Yeah.
And then it was sort of wait until the following year.
And did that capture, I suppose, sort of shape your angling approach on there?
Yeah, certainly for the following year. Again, the fish were predominantly the edge. There was 2 or 3 of us. Though once something's been done, it's never quite the same. We were going up in the closed season. Bearing in mind it was 100-mile drive, but I was going up. Say you could fish Split Lake, I think, that year, and I was doing a night on there, and then spending all day walking the car park, baiting spots, trying to emulate a similar thing that John had done the year before. John had pulled off by this stage. But again, you were learning what their sort of habits was at close quarters, and trying to get something going. But I say, once the season come, there was a few more of us doing it. South Fudgy, a couple of others, Cycroft, good edge anglers that were also. So the margins, you were all sort of baiting similar areas, so it was never going to be quite like what Little John had managed to do that previous year. There's a few more captures out in the pond that year, but again quite a lean year. I managed to get one again the following October, but say in the first 2 years it was one a year. It wasn't until the following year that I changed jobs. Sort of chucked the farm in after the foot and mouth previous year. It was just a lot of hard work for very little reward, and things were getting tougher and tougher. So at that stage I was like 28. It was like, if I don't get a sort of change of career, now I'll just get into a rut and never sort of change. Since then I've been in the fishing tackle industry, which at that time it did free me up a lot more time. I had a lot more time. I was earning more money than what I was on the farm, and doing a lot less hours working, a lot more hours fishing. I was a single guy, and to be honest, all the guys that were successful at the car park really were single guys. You had missus and kids. You were, it was that sort of obsessive place that wasn't conducive to a happy marriage, to be fair, or even relationships. But you had to be very selfish to be successful on there. And I say predominantly it was younger single guys, most of them local, which obviously they had the upper hand on me in that way, bearing in mind it was, I say, 100 miles for me to get there. So, but that third year I had more time on my hands, never fished so much, but it wasn't always the answer. It just gave you the opportunity to get in better swim, so to speak, and see what was going on and being able to adapt. And that third year was my most successful year on there. I had 5 fish, 2 of the mirrors, 3 of the commons.
How did you sort of mix it up that year then? Obviously spending more time on there, but what did you tweak and change to?
Well, that year again, the fish, every year was different on the car park. Whatever you learned the previous year, you almost seem to go back to square one every year. Like a lot of lakes, you think, well, the more years you do, you will gather information and you can work on that. The car park, every year,
Like a reset.
They erased that, and you had to reset, and it was different. That year, the fish were out in the pond, weed was savage, and they were getting caught out in the lake. A lot of it was sort of particle fishing, and sort of hemp and tigers, maybe a bit of sweet corn, that sort of thing, but predominantly they were at the edge. Out in the middle, I suppose the odd capture did get caught on the edge, but they had a year, 2 years of getting hammered in the edge, as hammered as the car park fish got. And they'd obviously learnt that was dodgy, and they'd gone back out to the safety of the weed beds. Again, line lay was a major issue. They knew where you were. The weed was that bad. Generally, most swims would only have a couple of fishable spots, so everyone was fishing the same sort of spots. You had tram lines pretty much going out to the spots. So it was hard to be different. So you were following in behind someone, and you were probably casting within feet of where they just pulled their leads out. Fish knew, the amount of times you'd wind in, and then you'd hardly skip the lead into your hand, and the fish would suddenly just swim across. You'd see a bow wave go, and then they drop down on your spot. You think, you've just been waiting for me to wind in, and you've gone in and fed they just knew.
God, that must be so frustrating.
Yeah, never. I fished a lot of lakes in the time. And there's nowhere quite like that place was. And fish were, I say, most years each one of them would come out once, twice, sometimes more. And you think, well, they're all catchable sort of thing. But the rod hours that went into catching them fish, and you think everyone, you could have an average certainly throughout the summer months of 10 guys a year, 2 rods each. That's a lot of rod hours for sort of 20 captures. So, yeah, each year was different. Each year was a struggle. So I go into every capture. Obviously everything's in the book, but yeah, I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't got it yet, so I won't say every capture.
No, of course.
But yeah, some special fish. Dustbin, one of many people's favourites. Again, who come on the last day of the season. That was a year I'd started fishing a bit around on the road lake. So I didn't fish that year exclusively on the car park, so I hadn't done as much time. And we were on a 48-hour rule then as well. It was only for a year or two I had of sort of doing a lot of time on there, because when the 48-hour rule came, because the lake was so busy, it was 48-hour on, 48-hour off, and that was pretty strict. It was, everyone knew when people would go in, and people were packing up early to be able to get back early 2 days later and such, so there was no way of sort of swerving it like you do on a lot of lakes to get the upper hand on people. But yeah, that trip, I hadn't had anything all year on the car park. Turned up sort of like 3 days before the end. I've come up after work one evening, I've got 40 hours, but I'm not going to start till the next day. So I didn't want to waste the night turning up in the dark. So I've sort of just spent the evening chatting to the lads. It was peeing with rain. So this is the end of March, season's finishing on you could fish till the morning of April the 1st, so like 8 o'clock in the morning. So I was fishing the night of the 30th and the 31st of March. Chatting to it was Matty was in the island, and I've heard a fish come out over the other side, and it's sort of between the gate and waiting man's. So that sort of knowing I had been thinking of fishing up the other end in the bars. Darren Miles, who's a very successful angler on the car park, got everything on there bar ever. In the end, he was up in the bars, and that was where I was originally thinking to go. So I'd been up there chatting with him, hadn't heard anything. I'd actually stuck my bivvy up on Split Lake, just up behind the sort of bars, snags, swim, to keep up there and then move on sort of first light, knowing that obviously you had to be off at 8 o'clock on the next morning, so I could start by 8 and fish the first 48 hours. So I'd heard that fish the previous evening, didn't hear anything else in the night up the top end. So come the morning, I've come round, I've seen some people are going, some people be turning up. So I've gone round, and I think Rob Malin was in the gate swim because he was doing days at the time, and gone round into the waiting man's, which, as I said earlier, was a successful swim for me. Caught many of them on there. So I knew a couple of spots. Little led about, found the spots. The thing with the car park, all my fish on open water had come to like super hard crackdowns. You can cast and cast, but until you got that real crack as though it's landing on concrete, I didn't get bites unless I got that crack. So you just keep casting until you got that crack. Obviously it had to be there. You find the small hard spot, but they were, like I said before, when witnessing like from the chunky capture how critical you had to be to get a bite. So I found a couple of spots. The longer one where I'd caught single scale from, I was confident on, and I found another spot further into the left. And literally about 30 yards out, where I'd seen a fish show previously. And again, these spots were like dinner plate size. So first night, nothing happened, and then early the following morning, a good friend of me, Lee Picknell, was in the gate swim. He turned up that day, and Malin had gone, Lee gone in there. So I just got up, so it was quite early, and I've heard Lee sort of jattering, like, and I've heard him say, I've only gone and caught the leather line. Yeah, so I've quickly sort of run round, and he's caught heather. Like, he's fishing like over on the trees, like waiting man's and the gate almost look out onto the same sort of water. The game where I'd heard the fish show, and he caught it in under the trees, which was literally 25-30 yards down my margin. So, if anyone apart from myself could have caught heather at the time, I'd have wanted it to be Lee. And obviously he had. And so obviously everyone's gone round, done the pictures and everything. This is basically the penultimate morning of the season. It's finishing 24 hours. So, chance has gone again. How close was I? Has it actually literally swam over my spot to get to where it's gone? It's a passing point. It was a good chance. It had been. How close was I? But don't matter how close you are, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And Lee had caught it, and fair play to him. And so we've all sort of had an early start, gone round, I say. A few hours passed, to sorting all that out. So I've come back. So I had Benny Hamilton next to me on Drumptons, and Nigel in Beach Monkey, and we've all got our rods out. I think it was about 1 o'clock, something like that. Got our rods out. It's like been up early from when we had the fish. So thought have a bit of a siesta, like. And so I had quite a few casts to get this rock hard cracked down, and it had gone down like really nice, especially the left hand rod, the shorter rod. So I'd literally put like 20-30 baits, sort of 14mm baits around it, just straight boilie, and on a little short pop up, little rig I used to use, and so I got into bed, got all nice and warm and comfy, so it's end of March, it was fairly mild, but still, still not tropical by any means. So, got in the bag and just sort of, got that nice warm, comfy bed, just drifting off like, and then suddenly left-hand rod just cracked the carbons, the butts hit it, and it's just sort of like tips bent down because quite tight clutches, and it's just starting to go. Sort of leaped onto it, quickly just pulled me ski techs on, like run down, pulled into it, and it's just wrenched the rod down and just taken about 20 yards off to me. Gone straight out through an old wee bed, but obviously through the winter it's all pretty dead stuff, like, but it's gone through. The water out there was probably 7 foot deep, something like that. It's just ploughed through this wee bed. Stopped it. Ben's come running in, and sort of standing by my side and just talking quietly through it, sort of thing, taking it steady, blah blah blah. Got it coming back, and it's coming back all the time. It's got weed round it, so it's not really doing a huge amount of that. Ben's got with the net in front of me, got the other rod out of the way, so it's come up. It's big lump of weed, and then he stuffed the net down deep, and then as he's pulled the net round it, all I had the visions of was this tail come out of the water, and it could be the tail of only one fish, this little round stumpy tail come out of the water hanging over the drawstring. And I've just plunged my foot into the cold water and grabbed the arm of the net and just shook it in. and just screamed dustbin. So it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everyone watching, and last day of the season, and the dusty bin was in the net. So what was going to be a complete blankety blank season, £40.12. Many people's car park favourite was dustbin. And very happy boy. Went to recast and realised I was down to me. I put another couple of pop-ups on, but they just weren't quite buoyant enough to set the rug. I'd say at the end of the season I didn't hold any more. I had a few, so I've literally taken the same hook bait off on the rig ring light, put it onto a new hook, new rig, got it back out, cracked down another sort of 20 baits, and got it last night. And anyway, so got an all year without bite, and then I think it was just gone 3 when I had dustbin, and then 2:45 that night, so just under the 12-hour period. It's gone again, same rod, same hook bait, and it's come in and think, what could it be like? And it's just plodding. It's just coming in really steady, but really weighty, and it's just holding its ground. It's come up, swirled a couple of times. This time Monkey's heard me, and he's come across the net, and it was quite moonlit. Can't remember if it was a full moon or not, but it was pretty moonlit. You just see this big sort of, it's come up on the surface under my tip, and then it's gone down. It's just surfaced, and all I could see was this like big wide creamy flank as it's sort of gone down in the moonlight. And all I could think of was Arthur. Could be Arthur. Got it in the net. It was chunky again. But that was 42.12, so I say from nothing. Brace of 40s hours on the last day, in just under 12 hours. So how fortunes can change.
Yeah, well.
So.
God, that's did the other straws? I assume everyone pretty much struggled like all the time on there. So.
Yeah, you'd have people would have spells that would suddenly, make hay while the sun shines. There's certain people that would come on, do well. Sort of Darryl Peck came on. Yeah. Slow start, and then once he sort of sussed it, Darryl's a young angler at the time.
He's using big baits on it.
Yeah, 20mm boilies. Everyone else at the time was using, tigers, hemp, this, that and the other. Yeah. He came on, done what he was used to doing, see where the fish was fizzing. Again, found them sort of rock hard, crack down spots. Yeah. And I think he had 3 the first autumn when he got it sussed. I think he had Uglo in the winter, and then came back and had another sort of 3 or 4 the following summer. So Darryl made it look relatively easy, as he has done on many lakes since. But that was obviously Darryl was an unknown then, right? But it was probably only me and Darryl that was casting and weren't using. A lot of them were using bait boats back then and dropping, but I was spodding. I didn't like the bait boat side of things really. I could see their edges and the stealthiness and everything. One day I was in the Curly and I borrowed a mate's one just about out bait. I was still casting. I ferried the bait out, and Steve Alcott turned up and went next to me, and Steve's proper old school, and someone I've got a lot of respect for and seen it all, and I just thought, I wonder what he thinks of using a boat sort of thing. Not I was still casting. Thought, if I caught heather, would it mean the same by using a boat, or would it mean more if I'd cast it out? And that just answered the question. Never used one after that. Still don't like them now, to be fair. So but most people used boats back then, and it's a bit odd one out. But I say Darryl used to cast, and he was using boilies, so it was sort of catapulting and throwing stick rather than spodding. But at least all my sort of captures came cast out baits, and it took as long as it took. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you felt like the eyes were burning in you as you was like casting and casting.
Mm.
People might think you're thrashing it to a foam, but it's a means to an end, and if that's what you need to be to confident,
Yeah.
you know, that's
Of
what
course.
you need to do, and so still like that today.
Yeah. How many seasons did you spend on there in the end?
Too many probably. I fished it for about, I think overall it's about 7 years, but that wasn't, I'd say the first sort of 4 or so was fairly exclusive, and then after that I had a gold card, so I used to flit about a bit more. Did the odd session at Horn, but didn't like that. It was just too deep and gooey, and again some of the swims would get stitched up.
Yeah.
Broad Lake I liked, fished there a bit. So the best ones out there, Clover and Scattered Lynn. But Frimley I used to fish in the spring, April, May. So yeah, used to get a few bites on there. Never had any of the real big ones, but had quite a lot of 30s and a lot, you know, shed loads of 20s and that. But it was good for some bites and good for, you know, building confidence and getting that sort of out your system before going on to the car park.
Yeah. Was the car park the lake that really sort of drilled in the accuracy of the spot finding, like you say, for you? Was it?
100%, yeah.
It's just stayed with you ever since.
Yeah. Okay, it was never good enough. It had to be
Yeah.
100% because, you know, not that you'd always get a bite when it cracked down, but
Yeah.
the times when you did get bites was when it had cracked down, so it was
Yeah.
that confidence thing in your head. If you
You
didn't
had to
get
go
that.
to bed, knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'd be casting and you think that's landed on exactly the same spot that it's landed the last 10 times, and it hasn't, and then all of a sudden it just goes down, crack, and you feel the rod vibrating through the reel seat.
Yeah.
You know, there was no like, oh, was that it? It was just like, landing on, chucking it onto a slab of concrete. But when you felt the spot, it just felt, you know, smooth, polished. You know, you find that very tiny. I always call it like pea shingle.
Right.
As though you're just bumping it across, and it's just like that. They fed on it, just graded off that very fine, where they've been sifting it. That sort of sandy sediment just sort of gone off. But with the lead, would just like landing on a piece of glass. Just go off to, you know, like I say, you get that tiny piece of glass, and then it just goes just on like that pea shingle thing. And if you could get it on that hardest bit of that spot, they were, you know, bearing in mind quite often these were like tiny holes in the weed, you know, be surrounded by weed as well, so it wasn't like you always had, you know, a good sort of entry into it. The line would be held up sometimes, or you'd go down, you might just catch a frond of weed. Obviously you needed to get that descent just right.
Yeah, the same speed and angle and everything.
Yeah, everything.
To give you that same feeling.
Yeah. But that's what I've always said, you know, there's spots and there's spots within spots. And until you know what you're looking for, until you get, you know, every lake's different. You know, some places you know, you have silt feeders and you want to be on the silt. You don't want that, you know. But Yately predominantly, Match Lake was the same as well. Had to be the rock hard bits really to get consistently to get bites. You know, other people will catch off other spots, of course they will, but that was what I always looked for, and was the successful bits, and which I've taken to many other waters, and, you know, trying to find them ultra clean, ultra smooth spots that you feel have been polished off. They've been polished off for a reason. So you think there wasn't natural food there because they're that hard, but for whatever reason
they'd like to feed off.
Yeah.
It's a preferred spot. Yeah, I suppose as well, it's like where the success comes into it is how quickly you can twig.
Yeah, you need to know
spot.
what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, there's already looking at books and reading things, but each water's, and until you catch from that,
Yeah.
you know, what works and what doesn't, And again, like you say, experience, and that comes from is piecing it together quickly. If you don't piece it together and realise what part of that capture was, you know, the main contributory factor to catching that fish, if you can't sort of work out what that is, then you're not looking for that again. But if you look for that again and you catch off it, you think, well, I'm onto something here.
Yeah, start to build
and
a
then
picture.
you do it, you know, wherever swim you go into and you start leading about, you're looking for that same sort of feature, and if you find it, and again, if you catch off it, you know, confidence breeds success, and success breeds confidence, you know,
Yeah.
so...
Do you always try and get your rods out when it's light then, for that reason? Because it must be so much harder trying to spot find.
Yeah, obviously you can clip up, you can see markers, but it's never, you know, obviously depending on the spot, but you can never get that pinpoint accuracy as you can in the day. And even, you know, where I fished waters and I've had a bite in the night and got it out, and you think, yeah, that's really good, unless you're, you know, you're looking in the morning, the line is perfectly in line and it hit the clip just right and it banged down just right. 9 times out of 10, I'll set my alarm for first light and recast it anyway.
Right.
Just so I know that, especially if it's like a morning venue, so to speak, you know, you think, well, I've got, you know, certainly in the summer, it's getting like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I've got bite times up through till 10 o'clock. I'd rather whiz it in at 4:30, clip it up, and as it's getting light, get it bang on the spot again, than sit there till 10 o'clock, wind it in, and pick the rod up and think, it's just plugged in something. It's not, you know, it felt okay when it landed, but it's not. I'd rather spend, you know, obviously you think, oh, I could be winding it in from a feeding fish, but I'd rather sit there and fish for them 5-6 hours knowing that it's on the money than sitting there thinking, fish are showing, I might not had a bite.
Yeah.
You know, I could have done something to obviously, you know, to get that bite.
Yeah, if that happened.
Whereas if I chucked it out the night before, day before it's got dark and I know it's 100%, I don't need to recast at first light because I know it's 100%.
Yeah.
But if you're getting tenched or whatever, you know, if you can make sure it's 100%, then I think, you know, that's where a lot of people, you know, don't catch as much as they could do because they're settling for second best.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't get get more time than a lot of people, I'm sure, but I don't get as much time as a lot of people. And the times that I am fishing, I want to make sure it's, you know, in the best possible spot. Otherwise, you know, why be there? You might as well be sat at home if you know, sat all night, especially this time of year when the nights are quite long. The last thing you want is it not on the money. So,
Yeah.
take that into,
I suppose you've got to factor the wind and everything else in, haven't you, as well?
Yeah. Again, like, you know, like when you recast, quite often sort of, you know, checking my phone, is the wind going to drop before it gets dark? Will I give me enough time to be able to get it there? Is the wind going to change direction? You know, which will help me just get, you know, especially the more range you go as well, you're going to, it's like bow in your line, you're not going to either fill that drop or it's going to land a foot or two short and different, although it's hitting the same clip. You've got a bit more bow in your line, it's never going to be as accurate. But if I know it's going to go flat calm before dark, then, you know, quite often weatherman don't get it right, but it's a bit easier these days with the internet and your phones and that you can see, and you think, oh, it's going to drop before it gets, you know, if you've got a big side wind on or something, it's going to drop before it gets dark, have everything clipped up ready, and then, you know,
wait for that gap and
wait for that gap, bang bang, and rather than chuck out when the conditions are bad and it's not quite on that spot. Still might do it, but if the wind dies, I can do it better and whiz them in, put them back up and do it again, you know. You might have only been out there 2 hours, but if the conditions drop, that you can improve it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes the wind's that bad or whatever that you've got to, you know, it's not perfect, but you've got to do it as best as you think, well, that's the best I can do in current conditions, then sometimes you have to settle for that. But then if the conditions change that you can improve it, then make the effort, do it. Because, as I say, the night can be a long time this time. And,
Definitely.
that can be the difference between catching that one you want and sat there snoring. So.
Do you always use braid?
No. It's, I've generally, recent years, any fish waters that I can use mono, I've always used mono. The only time that I used braid once was back on the car park when I was fishing sort of gate snag, and the reason I was using it was because there was no room for manoeuvre. It was under a canopy as opposed to snag, but snag was quite quick, and if I didn't get indication instantly, that vital couple of seconds could be the difference between the fish getting to the snag and I managed to catch pearly tail the first of the 3 times I caught it by using braid, but so I've got braid on at the moment. It's obviously allowed to here. Ranges, it's a lot easier, but yeah, 99% of the time I've always used mono.
Right.
And again, obviously braid is easier to fill the leads down, it is more instant. You're not getting that stretch in the mono, so you can be a little bit more accurate. But generally, I've always used mono and like having a bit of security with the mono, a little bit stretch in that. So, braid where it's allowed can be easier for pinpointing them spots, but sometimes it can over exaggerate your drops, like with your marker set up and you cast it and it cracks down. It never feels quite the same through mono because it's being diluted with the stretch in the mono, but then you get used to the feeling for that drop with mono. You suddenly do the same cast with braid, it's going to feel a lot more. So again, it's what you're used to.
And what about lead choice as well? So if you're really looking for those drops and spending all that time, do you sort of prefer one shape of lead or not?
The majority of the time these days, back then, Yately days, I used to use inlines most of the time. But these days I use a lead clip. Helicopters might cast a bit further than that, but I feel it gives them more movement. So I feel I get better hook holds and that with a lead clip, although again you've got a little bit of movement depending on what angle they pick it up from. But I like to be able to discharge the lead on the bite. So most places I'm fishing, it's very weedy. Fish tight clutches so they come up near the surface and try and get away from the danger. And I use just like a normal distance lead, 4 to 4.5 ounces depending on where I'm casting. The only time I tend to use smaller is if I was sort of casting onto fish for the disturbance sort of thing, or if it's a really close sort of finicky cast, because I think you can be, if you're just sort of flicking it, you can be a little bit more accurate and you get a little bit longer time to feel the drop sort of thing with a small lead. But yeah, I've probably got 1 or 2 sort of smaller leads in my pouch, and the majority are 4 to 4.5, so big lead. But again, you can feel it down better. It's got a reasonably large surface area to feel the drop, whichever distance they want. So just a bit more for the hooking properties. So generally 4 to 4.5 ounces.
Yeah. Obviously we can probably talk for hours, but like I say, I'm mindful of the time because it's a bit late, and obviously there's loads of this stuff in your book. So if people want to get hold of your books, we didn't really mention, what's the best way for them to do it?
I sell them at the shop where I work, Tackle Den, so if anyone's local to the area, just pop in, I can sign it for you, not a problem. Otherwise, send me a message on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, and you're on Instagram, you're at JG Claridge.
At JG Claridge, yeah. And obviously John Claridge on Facebook. So, I've got them listed on eBay as well, but if someone wants to just message me direct, I can get one posted off, no problem at all. So, getting low on copies now, so sooner or later the price will be going up when it gets down
That's
to
it.
the last few by the moment.
Scarcity.
A bit more reduced, more
Yeah.
demand and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyone's looking for a Christmas present, I've always had good feedback on it. So
Yeah.
it's 480 pages, 25 chapters, so
Right,
it's a
awesome.
good old chunky book. So.
Definitely, and obviously if the stories or anything like that you've given us like a bit of a little insight into, then yeah, it sounds definitely worth it, mate.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, brilliant. John, we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much.
Yep, good night.